Thanks everyone for joining. Hello to you wherever you are. We're very fortunate today to have a presentation by Nick Wiltshire and Janette Deacon, who are known to almost everyone, I think, certainly in this group, about eCRAG, which, at the risk of preempting some of what will be said, I think is one of the best functioning and longest running rock art recording programs in South Africa. Janette and Nick are both based in the Western Cape, and we're very excited to hear more about eCRAG. So thanks, Nick and Janette, over to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, David. I'm just going to read what I've written because, well, because I think you'd hear it better. So of the 4 volunteer groups that I've been associated with for the recording and conservation of rock art, each has involved a different group of people with a slightly different aim, but there are some similarities that are worth comparing. A major motivation for me initially was the awareness of rock art and the fun I had when I was a student and invited to join Ginger Townley Johnson, Chaim Rabinowitz and Percy Seif on field trips between 1959 and 1961 to record paintings in the Cederberg. The focus has shifted over time from, first of all, raising awareness, that's my awareness, to training, to networking, and then to recording. So under raising awareness then, the first project that I was involved in was in 1990 and 1992 when I received a grant from the Department of Environmental Affairs to do a survey of the rock art in the Cederberg wilderness area. And the Department of Archaeology at the University of Stellenbosch then employed Stephen Townley Bassett to do the fieldwork under my supervision, while a member of staff at the National Monuments Council from 1989 to 99, I saw how members of staff at the National Monuments Council responded positively to visiting cultural heritage places over weekends, sometimes removing graffiti at rock art sites. We called ourselves the A-Team and arranged a few visits to assist Stephen in the Cederberg, but we also traveled as far afield as Porvada in the Northern Cape and the Kango Caves. Sometimes we just slept under the stars to save accommodation costs, and petrol was a lot less expensive in those days. Then to get on to the question of training, the Southern African Rock Art Project was formed in 1994 by countries that were signatories to the World Heritage Convention. A decision was taken in RARI that year to encourage the nomination of a rock art site in each country from Tanzania southwards that would include the full range of rock art traditions in Southern Africa. We held meetings in Stellenbosch, in Pietermaritzburg, and in the Matopos. In 1998, Neville Agnew at the Getty Conservation Institute in Los Angeles heard about the SAHRIS program from Dinesh Kamamba in Tanzania, and he offered to assist with training along the lines that the Getty had already offered in Australia about 10 years earlier. So he and Sharon Sullivan from Australia came to the meeting in Pietermaritzburg and were very helpful in providing assistance and teaching materials at a training session held in the Matopos in 1999. After further training programs in Botswana, Zambia, Tanzania, and Malawi, that were funded by the World Heritage Centre and Norway, the Getty proposed a fully funded training program. And from 2005, we launched a series of courses sponsored by the Getty to train people already working at rock art sites open to the public in Southern Africa, and particularly World Heritage sites. One possibility was to establish a close relationship with Cape Nature, but it fell through for various reasons, but mostly because they were already committed to the management of flora and fauna and had no rock art expertise because it was foreign to their training and management and experience. A similar offer to Sand Parks at Mapungubwe was ignored because they could not see their way through to offering guided visits to rock art sites without armed guards. By 2011, we had trained about 100 people in Southern Africa, and a review of their careers in that year showed that only about 10% of the graduates were still in their jobs because they had used their training to get better positions in which rock art conservation and management played only a minor role. Then the third issue is networking. And from there, the Getty created an opportunity to bring together rock art managers and conservators in Southern Africa and Australia, and to summarize the best practice for rock art conservation and management with additional workshops in Namibia, the USA, France, and Spain. This provided the launching pad for the Rock Art Network, or RAN, that is summarized in the Bradshaw Foundation website with numerous pages by RAN members. And then finally, the contributing data is what we have been doing with eCRAG. During the years that SAHRIS was developing, I was concerned about the loss of membership in the South African Archaeological Society, and an opportunity arose when the owner of Buckkrans in the Cederberg, Johan van der Westhuizen, requested Simon Lau Koch, who sometimes accompanied the former A-team, for assistance in recording and managing the rock art on his property. Johan wanted to return the vegetation to its original state and to offer self-catering accommodation to guests. I went with Simon and Yvonne Viljoen of the Western Cape branch of the Archaeological Society to Buckkrans for a weekend, and we decided to invite ARCSOC members to training sessions to enable them to locate and record sites. It was a conscious decision to focus on contributing information mainly on the location and range of images at a site, so that anyone wishing to do research on an aspect of Cederberg rock art would be able to select sites from the database for more detailed investigation. We did not want to be distracted by tracing or detailed photography, as this would take too much time when working in a group of around 10 or more people. Simon Hall was on sabbatical at that time and offered the UCT teaching room for training. And Yvonne invited about 20 ARCSOC members with an interest in rock art to attend training sessions on a Saturday and Sunday in July 2007. A recording manual was presented to everyone, and most people signed up. It was a very different group from the A-Team, Cape Nature, and RAN, with mostly retirees in their 60s and early 70s. A practical field trip to Mount Cedar took place in October 2007, when details of the recording form and what to record were tried out. Regular trips that were then arranged to Buckkrans in 2008 and 2009, and a summary of findings and a management plan were presented to Johan in 2010, together with information and photos for the Roy Cederberg website, which unfortunately is no longer operating. Nick Wiltshire, who was writing his master's thesis on digital recording methods for rock art sites, joined us in 2008 and made many welcome changes to the recording process so that the data could be captured on a cell phone app and downloaded to the national database that is managed by SAHRIS. Looking back, there's no doubt that we would never have got this far with the project without Nick and his expertise. In addition to backgrounds, management plans were also written for the owners of Wiltshire in 2012, Rietvlei, Hartnexkloof, Cedar Rock, and Kroomrivier in 2013, Skimmelberg in 2015, and the Makies River Nature Reserve in 2016, and Zuurvlakte in 2019, after which the effort of producing printed and bound plans became too cumbersome. In 2015, having formed good relationships with Cape Nature, we played a major role in preparing the text and illustrations for 11 of the 24 information boards along the Cape Nature Treitjieskraal Trail. While initially we were able to secure free accommodation on field trips, after about 2011 it became more difficult, and currently we all pay for ourselves. Thanks to Nick, we have recently benefited from income that he has earned as a rock art guide at Buckkrans, and it is used to subsidize transport and accommodation costs for students. Anyone is welcome to join eCRAG, provided they are members of the Archaeological Society. Currently, we have 52 people on our mailing list, compared with 34 in 2018, representing almost 1/3 of the members of the Western Cape branch. Of the original 20 members, 8 remain, but only 6 who are in their late 70s and early 80s are still active. Several new members are on the Western Cape Branch Committee, so the model has been very successful in encouraging OCSOC membership. We have about 10 field trips a year, 1 a month, except for January and February when it's too hot, and we meet on the last Saturday in January every year to plan for the year ahead. We have demonstrated that social capital is as strong a motivation for membership as economic and cultural reasons. The mix of retirees and students helps with transport as well as with expertise in digital recording. Anyone wishing to join can attend one field trip, after which they must join the Archaeological Society to become an eCRAG member. So the key requirements that I think we have identified for a successful volunteer field work like this is, first of all, a willing team. Secondly, cooperative landowners. Thirdly, a mix of age groups to provide both transport and fitness. And fourthly, a permanent storage facility for the data. And five is expertise in rock art identification and digital recording. So you can't really run the show with only some of those things. You need everything to make it successful. Initially, groups of 10 to 15 participated in field trips, depending on the number of beds available. They had transport and mostly free accommodation. While socially successful, the group was often too large to manage and for everyone to learn the recording skills. So very often we were just sitting in the sun and talking rubbish. Currently, the group have 6 to 10 the groups are 6 to 10 members. And at first we went to properties at the request of the landowner, but now we identify areas that have not been thoroughly searched and we try to fill them. We've also found that some landowners are not keen for us to come and do the recording because they are afraid of land claims. But we have been successful with some of them in persuading them that this is not a real problem. Initially, we had recording forms that had to be copied manually into the database. Now we have a cell phone app, but the data still need to be checked by Nick before being added to SAHRIS, and he'll fill you in on those details. Initially, volunteers had difficulty identifying images as they were not familiar with the rock art literature. This has improved by circulating relevant published articles, and a collection of articles about Cederberg rock art was compiled, but I realized that it needs to be updated. It's essential to have someone knowledgeable in each group. That Nick has recently divided into clip springers, the people who go ahead and find, and the recorders, those who stay and do the recording. What has not worked is that there are often too many people, and the opportunity for new members is then quite limited, especially if they don't have their own transport. So active membership of about 30 is probably the maximum. And then if there are too few people with expertise and experience in map reading, data capture and management, we have had several teaching and information sessions, but there could be more, maybe just more field trips, I don't know. But people tend to forget what to do between field trips. And cost has been really only an issue for student involvement. We have found that most of the older members are in it for the experience and do not mind paying for accommodation. So that's my input. Nick, over to you.
Sure, thanks, Janette. So I'll cover a little bit more about some mechanics of what we do or how we go about it. So I'm just going to flip to the presentation. So as Janette mentioned, we did have a paper-based form when we started eCRAG. I joined eCRAG about a year after it was established, I think in 2008. And as a master's student, it was a nice fit for me because I was already interested in the area, going out to record sites. But the bulk of my master's was around digitization, building a database. I used a Microsoft Access database at the time, an offline standalone application, and digitizing all the records at GCT in the Spatial Archaeology Research Unit. So many of you met Royden Yates or Tony Manhire, who worked with John Parkington, and many other members of staff at GCT. But they would go out and carry out the third-year field schools and add all this information to their library of sites. So those were the primary records that I started with when I worked on my master's. And then as time went by and joining eCRAG, I got to know Janette a lot better and worked on her records and absorbed them into the same database that I was digitizing. Choppy or Antonietta Giardino, then I met Chaim Rabinowitz at his home and digitized his records while having tea and biscuits at his house. And that all their records, which is about 500, were also digitized and added and scanned to the same archive I was building. And eCRAG was clicking along very nicely. I think we seriously started surveying in 2008. I think the 2007 trip was, I think there was 1 or 2 training trips. But 2008 and 9 and 10, we largely completed the Buckrants survey and then expanded the surveys onto the neighboring properties. So we went north and south of Buckrants and expanded on, and then carried on. We would then complete a farm and contacted owners adjacent to that, or we just got people got to know us through particularly Rika Duplessis, who was the Cape Nature manager at Mikey's River in the sort of corner of the area that we were working in. So she introduced us to a lot of the landowners who then brought us in and hosted us for surveys. So all this was sort of taking place while I was completing my work for my thesis. And I then was employed at SAHRA in the late 2011 and got the job to build SAHRIS. And so all the sort of offline standalone work that I'd prepared for my master's was uploaded and imported and laid the foundation for what is now SAHRIS in 2012. And in, I think, late 2012, we launched the first cell phone recording app, which we used a free open source tool called Open Data Kit, and I designed the form we were using for eCRAG in a digital way on the app, and we then were able to record on site offline. It would record the information offline, and as soon as we had Wi-Fi or cell phone access, it would upload those records to SAHRIS. And the only thing we had to do was upload the photographs once we were back in Cape Town to SAHRIS. In 2023, we released a new version of SAHRIS, so it went to version 2, and similarly, you can now upload your records from a cell phone app to the new version of SAHRIS. We use a slightly different tool. It's called Kobo Forms, and it works both on Apple iPhones as well as Android. So the old ODK application only worked on an Android phone, but the new one is simply a web form which you go to a link and you save that to your cell phone home screen, and then it stores that in memory on your phone. You don't have to download anything from the Play Store or anything fancy. It's very quick to get up and running on the new app. So that was our old form. So this pretty much hasn't changed. You know, the information on our old form, we migrated into SAHRIS. And while I was digitizing different collectors' records, you know, you have to transform the information and match fields with fields that sort of are similar and merge the data into something that can be imported into one system. And so the old version of SAHRIS, the version 1 version of SAHRIS, was largely a one-size-fits-all application. And when we went to Drupal, which is the content management system for SAHRIS, the old version of SAHRIS was trying to sort of cater for every possible type of recording, but there wasn't very much differentiation between different recording types. So if someone was recording buildings, for instance, they ended up largely in the same place as someone recording an archaeological site. On the new version of SAHRIS, the differentiations become a lot deeper in the new version of SAHRIS. So there's a lot more difference between people recording paleontological sites and archaeological sites. And the associated fields with each one of those disciplines is quite separate. And, you know, people largely get on with it within their own disciplines. But again, the fields that we used are all there, and we were able to move the information, migrate the information from the old version of SAHRIS to the new version of SAHRIS. So this is a screenshot of the old Access database, and now and then, every couple of years, I'll still go onto this to export something for someone who's carrying out research. One of I think Liddy is on this call at the moment, and she, for instance, had her project on paintings of bags in the Cederberg area, and I digitized the records and also analyzed each site to tag what kinds of motifs were present at each site, an elephant or bags or figures wearing karosses, that kind of thing. So all of this was flagged or tagged per site when I went through all the records, and then I used a geographical information system to map out all that in a spatial way to look for patterns in the distribution of rock paintings in the region that we were interested in. And this is still very useful today because we can export that information depending on the type of question people are interested in. So if someone's looking at stereoanthropic imagery in this region, we're able to send out a map to that person, and that shortlists the sites that they need to look at where we've picked up stereoanthropic imagery. Granted, you might interpret other sites as being stereoanthropic, which are not as easy or clear, perhaps, as the sort of more macro level that I was looking at this back in my master's many years ago. But it does get you started and gives you a big head start to carrying out more research. When we moved from the offline paper recording, so you can imagine we were, as most of us do, is still to fill in a physical form on site, and then you go back to your home or wherever, or your office, and you physically have to capture that information onto a spreadsheet or whatever it is you use. That largely was upgraded in 2012 and 2013. The screenshot on the left shows you the ODK application, the Android-only application, which many of the eCRAGers are familiar with. And on the right-hand side is the HTML5 web form application called Kobo Forms, which is a fork of the same family of software developers that developed ODK. And it's backwards compatible with the structure of ODK, but this makes it a lot more flexible on different devices. So if you were using a tablet or a iPhone or Android device or even a PC, you can use the same form, and it will adjust itself dynamically to the screen size that you're using. So it's a very user-friendly tool to develop on. You don't need to be a coder. Most of it's plug and play and drag and drop. And we've designed the form for recording our rock art sites to be compatible with SAHRIS. So when we download the table of records, we're able to upload that directly to SAHRIS without having to retype any of the information. Of course, we have to clean up the information, or there might be mistakes or numbering issues that we fix before we import that information back to SAHRIS. So again, many of you use SAHRIS for your research into sites. The old version of SAHRIS is this screenshot, and this is where we used to upload our photographs to SAHRIS once we'd imported the sites from the ODK application. And this shows you the site view. So this is, I think, a site called Zeeflatte, and it's in the southern Cederberg / Swartruggens area, really, of the Cederberg. And there were many recordings. You can see the list of recordings there over the years. Heimer Binowitz went there in 1959, Ginger Tiny Johnson, and the crew and the volunteers that they had along with them. And in Simon Hall and Aaron Maisel went there in the early 2000s, and eCRAG recorded there a number of times as well in the late 2008 to 2010s, and updated the photographs and the GPS coordinates for that site. The same site looks a little bit different on the new version of SAHRIS. So the theme is more mobile friendly. The information's packed into one screen, so you can flip through the information under the different tabs, the different archaeological recordings or the rock art descriptions. And the media are also presented to you under the media tab. So you don't have to sort of flip through multiple screens all the time to view the information linked to a site. So, you know, the new version of SAHRIS takes a bit of getting used to if you're very used to the old one, but it's a big jump forward for the site, and it's a lot faster and more stable than the old version of SAHRIS. So I think that the difference, you know, in what eCRAG is doing and how we've gone about it, it's been, you know, a fairly organic process. I don't think we really thought about all of this right at the beginning, but it's a way of recording with the not the public in mind, but with the general public of the research community and heritage managers in mind. So it's not just linked to an institution or a university. So when we record, we are quite aware that other researchers or staff of Heritage Western Cape or SARA or whoever, landowners, you know, people who would potentially declare, you know, rock art sites as provincial heritage sites, perhaps, you know, all of these different parties have access to this information, you know, through the right permission systems, of course. And that's probably worth mentioning, is that the coordinates and the location information of these sites is generally hidden from the general public. You have to belong to a group on SAHRIS in order to see the information. But belonging to the group is not a very difficult process. Any researcher that just you know, is interested in the rock art in the area that we're recording in is automatically given access. They simply email us and we just add them in. It's not a big rigmarole to do that. But generally speaking, besides protecting the location of the sites, we also help people know who the landowners are if there are particular issues. You know, we don't want landowners who've developed a good relationship with us and allowed us on their farms to suddenly get people pitching up on their farms unannounced and suddenly saying, oh, but I have access to this information on SAHRIS. So there's a little bit of a filter which helps them go through the right channels. So the other things we do, besides recording on the phones while we're out in the field, is before each trip, we prepare for the field. So we look at an area and work out where the gaps are and what hasn't been surveyed. So we are trying to conduct systematic surveys. We'll never ever find all the sites in the area. We always miss, you know, one or two. And those of you familiar with the Cederberg or the greater Cederberg types of sites, you know, there are many sites on little boulders or very, very low overhangs that can be easily missed. So, you know, it's always possible to miss out one. Just this past weekend, we came back with 23 new recordings just in a small area. So that's the density is very high of individual sites, but the number of paintings is not very high per site compared to the Drakensberg paintings. You know, we will have one overhang with you know, hundreds or thousands of images just at one site. So each time we complete an area, we mark out a polygon. We map out a boundary area like the one you're seeing in this screenshot, which gives us an idea that that area is sufficiently surveyed or done, if you like. And we're happy to move on and not repeat or survey again in that area, so that we don't waste time moving on to another area. And then as it all sort of comes together, this map shows you the different sub-regions within what we're calling, when it's not really the Cederberg. You know, the Cederberg is only this little area in orange in the middle, but you've got the Olifants River, Citrusdal and Clan William sort of either end of that pink area. The Swartruggens and the Koerbokkenveld lie sort of in the red and area, and the sort of area west of that red circle oval. Then the Eastern Cederberg, which is really our core group area, which we folks started on, is that light blue color. And we started in the northern end towards the Wuppertal end and moved down. So or either side of that, really, not quite as far as Wuppertal, but we did reach the Full-Flay farm, and then all of the farms down to the Koerbokkenveld have largely been done. And at the time of compiling my master's thesis, this had some of the sites. I know it's very small red dots. I'm sorry about that. You're probably struggling to see, but the little red dots are all rock art sites. And the area within that light blue oval and the western part of that, sorry, the eastern part of that orange circle in the middle, those were added by eCRAG, largely added by eCRAG. And then the areas to the west in the Sandveld, that green area, and the yellow area along the Durang, and then that cluster of areas along the Pakhuis, Sibylle, Bushmanskloof area, all of those were mainly done by UCT, you know, from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, as well as Chaim Rabinowitz and their friends who went up to record with them. So all of those sites were recorded already before we started eCRAG. This is a map showing you what the distribution of sites looks like today. So another 15 years after completing my master's, when I published that map, the yellow highlighted sites show you all the sites added by eCRAG. And that totals about 1,700, 1,750 today. We have almost 50 over the last 2 weeks. And the red dots show the sites that were previously recorded by Chaim and his group and UCT. And those total about 2,000 sites. So between UCT, about 1,500, and Chaim 500, we just beat UCT out as the highest scoring group, if you like, recording rock paintings in the area. And you know, there have been a couple of other contributors as well over the years. You know, as I say, Simon Hall and Aaron Maisel recorded some sites in 2000 and 2001. But these are largely the three groups that have recorded the most sites in this area. So all of this sits on SAHRIS, which is a Drupal content management system, which people can access over the web. But what we use all the time is a system called QGIS, it's an open source GIS program, which gives us direct access to all of these sites. So what I have to do before we go out to each trip is ensure that we have the correct numbers to continue the numbering of the previous recordings. We try and verify if there are sites that are mismapped or the information is partial or missing. So some of Chaim's old sites, they didn't have GPS in those days. So we try and locate them and then give them the correct GPS coordinates. And then if we've relocated that site, of course, we add to that recording. So we fix the GPS coordinates on SAHRIS, and we then add additional photographs or de-stretched images and so on to complete the records of those existing sites that are already known on SAHRIS. So it's a sort of iterative process, and we prioritize areas where there are blanks, where the geology is suitable and likely to provide a good number of sites. And we estimated at the beginning of this year that we have, you know, roughly about 4,000 recordings completed thus far. And given the distribution of sites and given the area from, the Hex River Valley in the south to Van Reynsdorp, in the north, or Nieuwoudtville, I guess, would be the sort of outer bounds of the region, if you like, and the Sunveld to the west, Elands Bay, Lamberts Bay. That area there would probably has about 8,000 to 10,000 sites in total, and that means we have about 20 years of eCRAG to record the rest of the sites, and we were doing about 100 a year over the years. So we have a meeting each year in January at Janette's place in Hermanus, and we then use that time to plan the field trips for the next year, as well as report back on the year that's gone by. And as I say, sometimes it's been more, sometimes it's been less, but we've generally kept the rhythm around about 100 sites per year, so 10 per field trip. And at that rate, we think we could complete a baseline survey of this area, where most of the sites would have been located, over the next 20 years. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers the recording process. I can show you guys more things, but I think I'll stop there, and then maybe we can do some questions.
Thanks very much, Nick. Thank you, Janette. It's fantastic to see the kind of spatial and numerical data that you have from these many years of this project. Shall we go to the floor? Any questions? If not, I'll ask a question in the meantime. Nick, for the app, or rather the recording page that you've got, is it available for people to download or to access via a particular link or platform?
Yep, it's available. And what I would recommend people do is to use what we've done as a baseline to your own research. So if you're looking at recording different aspects, perhaps there are particular parts of the sites that you're interested in, and expanding on particular research questions that you have, the kind of baseline data could be the same. Where's the site? What's the site? There's also a new thing that's on SAHRIS, which is using they call it the inventory number, and that generates a code within the map sheet automatically for you. So those of you who've worked with the KZN Museum are familiar with their map sheet numbering system. So 3438 BB009 or whatever it is. So that'll be the 9th site within that 1 in 50,000 map sheet. So SAHRIS does that automatically for you. So we imported all of the SAHRIS map sheet numbers from the KZN Museum. So they haven't changed their numbers, but new sites automatically, it has code which works out what the new map sheet number should be, which is quite cool. So if you're working in a particular map sheet, you don't need to know the farm name is Jakkelsnes or whatever. You just look at the map sheet and you'll get all the numbers of the sites within that map sheet, which is quite nice. So so to start with your baseline data, so that it's the same kind of core data, if you like, that would be relevant to where it is and roughly what is there. And then on the app, you can add additional fields that have got nothing to do with SAHRIS. So you might you export that information to an Excel sheet, which you could use for your analysis, looking at different aspects of the paintings that are just for you, just as a researcher. As I say, it's very, very different. So I was very fortunate to have Janette and her archive, Royden and Tony and John's archive at SARU, all the students work for 30 years, as well as Haim and Ginger's archive, to look at how they all saw the rock art recording process, because they had their own forms, each one was different, and then to adapt that into one system, back for my master's thesis, but also what would the working for SAHRA, what would it look like recording for everybody rather than just for your university or just for yourself as a recorder, and building up an archive of recordings, which then die with you, or it gets donated after your death, or you try and donate this thing after some years. But I know there are a lot of, people have a lot of sensitivities about their records because it's overly personalized. And unfortunately, when you don't record with everyone else in mind, when you try and go to an archive where you're doing recording just for yourself, there's a worry, I guess, that you're going to be judged or something like that if your records became publicly available to other researchers and so on. So right from the beginning, with eCRAG, it's always been, we gave all of our records to SAHRIS, for instance, in a big export 10 years ago. We took the whole database, put it on a hard drive, gave it off to Aziz. It doesn't, the information's not, it's not this precious thing that it's ours and it can't be published or whatever it is, or hidden. So we really been very open to other people to take what we've done and go with it. The new app is quite recent. So the old one on ODK ran for 10 years, I think, that we were using it. And it didn't work on iPhones, unfortunately, the old one. So it did block people who didn't have Android phones. So, but again, I think it's been very difficult to get this thing to scale. The rock art recording world, I suppose, is very small. There are not that many of us doing it. And it's been quite interesting to see over the years just how closed the little silos are. And I think the groups and the talks that we're giving, like such as this one, are hopefully going to break down these barriers a little bit and get people to know, oh, there's these free things available that can be helpful to them. And there are people around who are also willing to help import older records as well. So, it's not just about going out to the field with new recordings that you can use these tools, but there are resources available for older collections that need to be on SAHRIS. I might make an observation, Janette. I think you probably agree. I think that the over the years, the fact that it's they're two very different types of people in the group. So you've got your ArcSoc members who are not archaeologists, who are just interested in rock art and archaeology in general. That's why they joined ArcSoc. And then you've got, we've had to have professional archaeologists in the group to sort of run things, to where we're going, the recording process, largely organizing the trips. But it is quite different to excursions where there's a site and it's an ArcSoc excursion to visit this particular site, and it's a tour, if you like, where there's quite a lot of pressure on the archaeologist who's been invited to give a presentation or a talk at that particular site. There's a lot of prep work. The members will then ask a million questions, and you're expected to know everything, off the top of your head. And it's a few hours out on site, which can be quite intimidating for a lot of archaeologists, to sort of handle that stress, that they feel there's a lot of attention on them for, the duration of the day to go out to that site. With the recording of eCRAG, I find, because it's not the attention's on recording, it's about locating those sites, bushwhacking, bundu bashing. It's very, very exciting. All the members say the same thing every single time, even after 18 years of doing this. They still get that thrill whenever a new site is located, and it never gets old. So it moves the attention away from everything being on the archaeologist to sort of dictate everything. This is where we're going. This is how long it will take, and so on. To you kind of share the experience of being out for the weekend. So you generate a lot of bonds and friendships. But I think the level to which the non-archaeologists have picked up the recording process has been very variable. So some not at all and are just there for a nice weekend and enjoy being out and enjoy the friendships that have formed. To a spectrum of people who've taken on organizing the trips or some of the recording, or have become very good at the de-stretch process or the photographing of sites and so on. But it's quite a mosaic of interest and ability to handle the full recording process. And I think the recent introduction of the UCT students last year, using the funding that we got from the Aussie Fund, is the hope is to turn the students into essentially super users, if you like, that know the whole process from end to end, and that, you know, because they're archaeologists, they need to know all of this as part of their professional lives, and they need to be able to run a trip and carry out the whole recording process. And I think it's useful for other people potentially wanting to launch similar groups. You know, there are vast areas of the Eastern Cape and KZN that have not been surveyed thus systematically at all, Mpumalanga and so on, for rock paintings. And it's very different to the impact assessors that are doing the survey work for, you know, for a living as consultants. The time constraints within an impact assessment and an eCRAG weekend are completely different. The results you get from an eCRAG survey in terms of locating rock art sites is like 300-400% higher than what you would get in an impact assessment. We're not bound by time, so we don't. You know, you have to check every single rock and survey, so you're not really. You know, the amount of sites we've managed to pull out has been very high. So replicating what we've done with eCRAG, I do think you do have to have a core group of people, 1 or 2 people running that group that have all the skills, as Janette mentioned, and then the rest will follow, and not to expect too much. I think from your non-archaeologists, it's fine as long as they're enjoying it, and it's partly an, you know, for us it's an ARCSOC hook, if you like, that they're there and they're enjoying it and that they're enjoying their membership of ARCSOC, but they contribute in other ways through giving transport and fuel and lifts and good company, and it makes the group sustainable rather than one thing which is just a project done by a researcher with a particular question and then it ends with that particular research. So, you know, I think that's been very interesting. And then in terms of funding, you know, besides the students getting funding to come on the trips with eCRAG now, all the years that eCRAG's run has been self-funded. So all the members have paid for themselves to the petrol and accommodation when we paid for accommodation. And I think that's been a very good model to follow too, because the amount of administration in applying for funds from the Lotto or from a bigger funder to run something like a rock art group would change. It changes the dynamics and the expectations from something that's fairly organic and low key. You know, we're not saving lives. So it's something fun, but also worth doing. It's made it, you know, we're here 18 years later and still doing it, and, you know, we're hoping to do another 20 years of this. And I just think if we had brought in huge, you know, funding to pay for the petrol of all the vehicles and so on, I think we would have been spending a lot more time running the administration of this rather than just getting on with it, you know, and going out there without setting expectations too high. So just 2 kind of findings, I think, that have been quite interesting about it.
Thanks very much, Nick. I think it's, at least from my perspective, and I haven't been in the game, as it were, that long, but it really seems to be a model for how this kind of thing can be done now, given all the technologies that are available, given everything that is known, given that SAHRIS is set up and running, and it's ready. Obviously, if we're talking about kind of legacy projects that have been going for 30 years in a particular area, it's a big step to digitize everything. Not impossible, it's just a big step. But certainly for new projects, and particularly recording projects, because I was just thinking, seeing the dots on the map that you've got up there, the only other map that I think it looks anything like that is Van Ritlo's map from 1952 or something, and at least to my knowledge, we don't have one for the whole country. And it would be so nice if one day we get to that point where we've got all the information, all the dots on the map, and then we can talk in general terms without being too non-specific. So thanks for sharing your observations and experience and your thoughts for the future. I think we're going to come to a close. I'll just open up the floor again for any questions. Lily, over to you.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Hello. Hi, everyone. Just something that confused me a little bit when I first found out about it, that maybe Nick would be helpful if you explained for everyone who also might not be sure about it, would be when you submit the form, where it goes. Because I know now you shared on the chats the recording form, so people play around with it now and want to submit or save a draft, what actually that means or what would happen to it. Yeah, maybe if I was a little confused, so I'm sure someone might also, but
yeah, I'd be happy. I've actually got the queue of eCRAG recordings on at the moment. I can actually quickly just show you what goes on. I'll just share my whole screen, I think. Yeah, let me just do entire
Thanks,
screen.
Nick. I think we can have a look at that, and then I think we'll have one time for just one more question, I think from Dawn, and then yes, we'll have to bring the meeting to a close.
Yeah, so hopefully you can see this, but it's once you've submitted on the form, it ends up in the Kobo Toolbox account that is linked to that form, and there's a table format, if you like, of the sites that you've recorded. You can click on each one of these, view the detailed recording that was submitted, with all the records. And this is, if you like, a staging area or middle area between this information and SAHRIS. So if you're recording just purely for your own purposes, you can open up a free account with Kobo Toolbox. You don't have to pay for this. And you can then record away on your own phone app, if you like, that you've developed. And then the information will be stored for you on this online repository or server. Where the SAHRIS bit comes in is we export this information, and then it ends up looking like this. And then we import this information into SAHRIS. So there are these, they're called feed importers. So on SAHRIS, we go up and we go to the feed importer, which only some of you would get permission to. So this is something that you apply for rights to get into this, and then you're able to import that information onto SAHRIS. So if there are 5 people in the whole country that do this, then that would be a lot still. There are only a few of us doing this, but it's all already set up in SAHRIS to read this format. So as I say, if you go and modify the format that is on the SAHRIS form at the moment, it's fine. You just know that your new categories or your new fields that you've added for your own purposes just don't pull across to SAHRIS, and there's probably no need for them to pull across to SAHRIS. So if you were looking at something specific about therianthropic imagery, that's just for your own research. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on SAHRIS as a site record. yeah, I think that that's where it goes. So I'm actually about to give the students, they didn't know this, but extra training on this part of the process, which is post-field. How do we clean up the sites and then pull it from the Kobo server and import it into SAHRIS and then upload the photographs. So that's the next part of their training that's about to come. So hopefully they'll learn that quite quickly.
Dawn.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Janette. I actually just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for your contribution to rock art research. Thank you so much for your inspiration. And it is an inspiration. I loved what Janette emphasized about social capital, and which you have reinforced, Nick. And Nick, your generosity in sharing your knowledge and information is just mind-blowing and so appreciated. The app is a game changer, and I think there is a difference between surveying and recording rock art and recording rock art for research. I think there are two different things, and I really appreciated checking these mountains and knowing that you have a record, it's there. You don't have to worry about getting back and then going through all this paper and what belongs to what. It's hugely helpful. I just wanted to check though for everyone's information, because this is important. Is the team at SAHRIS still happy to upload our analog information for us? So all of those old site records and our print photographs.
So it's a good question. I think, one is, you guys know who I am, and, there's other people that over the years have developed a strong understanding of SAHRIS and what it can do and what it can't do. But my email address and my phone is always available to people to call me and to plan if they were looking at doing recording and using this app, for instance, and adapting it to their needs. It's really no skin off of my back to help you get there, and say, okay, these would be new fields and this is what you would do with that. And, you don't need to mix that with the old things or, the baseline things that pull into SAHRIS. But I think the principle of uploading the information to a central repository, which is available beyond your own career or life or whatever it is, I think is really important. I think that having a national repository for the site information, the fact that we're able to go back to these older recordings and fix things and improve the records and know that it's been recorded, or that is invaluable. And I think that it's not setting the interpretation world on fire. That's not what we have been going out to do specifically in baseline recordings. It's just to get a recording of what's there and good photographs, but we're not trying to be the best photographing outfit there for rock art, or it's not linked to one particular research question only, etc. We're trying to create an opportunity for people to go forward from what we've done if they have particular research questions. For the older archives, again, it's good to have a call first. So, with this, I'm happy to do that with anybody, is to look at what you've done, what is the scale of your archive, what is the format of it, and what it would take to get that archive into SAHRIS, and what kind of resources are available. So the National Inventory Unit, the NIU at SARA, has, I think, 7 staff now, but the ability to just take on digitization is quite limited. I don't think they are advertising that they do that per se. They have all these different projects that they've been assigned to run. So what they're doing a good job of is managing the service provider who supports the system to ensure that it's up and running and it doesn't crash and that it's backed up, and any potential issues from an IT side are addressed timeously. So they've done a good job of that. They're hosting the system free of charge for everybody, so people don't have to pay. And in certain limited particular projects, they've helped carry out this transformation of information to fit the format that's compatible with SAHRIS and imported via bulk import into SAHRIS. But I think a lot of that stuff can be done through the rest of the community. Again, we don't, people like myself or Jenna and so on, we don't charge people to get help on how to get the information into SAHRIS. So there's a community of us that will help you set up a framework, and these are the tools, the templates and things that you can use that you could then carry on. But to do large bulk capture of information, if you're having to type up information from scratch, from paper records and so on, then that's a bigger job. And I don't think SARA itself would do that for you free of charge, but you probably need to look at either students who have a particular research project in the area that overlaps. So with Himes records, I typed up all of those records, or OCR, so I scanned the typed up records that had been typed up by the ADRC and tried my best to get as much of that information into text form that I could copy and paste into the database at the time, but had to retype quite a lot of the pages that didn't translate, or the handwritten records by ECT. I had to manually write them all up myself into the database. But because I was a student and because that was my particular project, I did it and it was done. So I would, again, through this Rock Art Forum, that's, I think, part of the sort of thing to sort of get students involved, get the students aware of what we need. And if we knew there are 7 collections that need digitization, then we could steer resources towards that, or hire data captures and get funding and help you get a funded proposal where 6 months of a data capture could be assigned to you. So there are ways and means, but it just means getting it clearly defined so that we know how long a piece of what is it, a piece of rope is with your data, how long it would take to sort of type it all up in the worst case scenario.
My thanks on behalf of RARI to Nick and Janette for your time to share all of this with us, and thanks everyone for joining online.
Pleasure.
Keep well and see you next time.